in the name of personal injury law.
No one thinks they're going to be in an automobile crash, but unfortunately it happens to many Michiganders every year. Today we have Steve Sinas of the Sinas Dramus Law Firm to answer some critical questions about auto crash cases. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So, who pays for the vehicle damage when there's an automobile crash?
This is a question we get often at our law firm, and the answer is when you're in an automobile crash, if it's someone else's fault, you still first turn to your own insurance coverage if you have that for your vehicle, and your insurance company will pay your vehicle damage. If they make you pay a deductible, you can pursue that recovery from the at-fault driver. And if you don't have insurance on your vehicle, you can pursue your vehicle damage from the at-fault driver, but it's capped at $3,000. So there can be unfortunate situations where people have a loan on a car, they owe a lot of money on the car, and the car is totaled. If they didn't have proper insurance on the car, they only can get $3,000, and that can be an unfortunate reality for people to face.
If a person's injured in a car crash in Michigan, who pays for their medical expenses?
The answer to who pays a person's medical expenses begins with the Michigan no-fault insurance law governs people's rights who are injured in a motor vehicle accident. And under that law, people have a right to pursue no-fault benefits. And one of those benefits is coverage for your medical expenses. Whether a person has the right to pursue no-fault benefits depends on the coverage they have in their own household for auto insurance and some other factors that determine and affect whether a person has the right to pursue these benefits. But if you make that determination that there is the right, the person can pursue whatever is reasonably necessary for their care, recovery, and rehabilitation of their injuries. However, that coverage may be capped. It can be lifetime, depending on the coverage you have in your household, or it could be limited to $500,000, or $250,000, or $50,000. It all depends on the coverage you have available to you.
So how should an injured person pursue their medical treatment if they've been injured in a Michigan auto crash?
One thing I say to clients is that you should pursue medical treatment in the same way that you would pursue medical treatment for any other injury or condition you sustain in life. You pursue the treatment you need, no more, no less. As far as the logistics go, you need to understand what type of no-fault coverage you have, the extent to which it covers your medical expenses, and then there's also this issue about whether you have coordinated no-fault or uncoordinated no-fault. If it's coordinated, that means your health insurance has to pay first. So the practical pointer here is that you have to understand your own no-fault insurance coverage, understand whether other types of health insurance coverage is supposed to also pay, and then make sure your providers have the information about all those coverages so that they know who to bill and that the bills get to the right insurance company.
Who pays for the lost income when a person's injured in a Michigan car crash?
When a person's injured and they can't perform their job and so therefore they lose income, they can pursue their income loss through their no-fault benefits. There's a no-fault benefit known as the work loss benefit that covers 85% of their gross income, and it's covered up to 3 years. So there is a good right to pursue there. If the person has an income loss over and above what's covered by their no-fault benefits, they can pursue that excess income loss from the at-fault driver. People should also understand that their no-fault insurance could be coordinated, which means that they first have to turn to other disability insurance and have them issue their payment before you can have no-fault have to pay you any work loss. So there's some issues there to determine in terms of other disability insurance you have available to you.
What can you sue the at-fault driver for when you've been injured in the Michigan car crash?
You actually have limited damages that you can pursue against an at-fault driver. You can pursue some vehicle damage if you don't have your own insurance coverage for it. That's capped up to $3,000. But you can also pursue pain and suffering damages and excess economic loss that's not covered by Michigan no-fault insurance. You should understand, though, in terms of the right to pursue those damages, they're subject to unique standards, and there can be situations where people aren't able to claim something like pain and suffering damages because of the special rules that apply to those claims under the Michigan no-fault law.
Who pays for the pain and suffering damages?
You pursue your pain and suffering damages against the at-fault driver. Also, the owners of vehicles driven by at-fault drivers, they can be held liable. And if the at-fault driver is operating the vehicle in the course of his or her employment, the employer can be held liable. there are other ways other parties can be held liable depending on their relationship with the driver and how the driver is using the vehicle. You should also note that the right to pursue pain and suffering damages is subject to the threshold injury rule. That rule essentially says that you cannot pursue pain and suffering damages unless you have a serious injury, which is either death, serious disfigurement, which consists of amputations or serious scarring, and there's also serious impairment of body function, which most cases fall under, and that says that a person can only recover pain and suffering damages if they sustain an objectively manifested impairment that affects their ability to lead their normal life. And there's a whole set of legal principles that apply to those issues. The long and short of it is that people should understand that not all people are entitled to pain and suffering damages from at-fault drivers.
What happens if the at-fault driver does not have insurance?
There are situations where drivers get behind the wheel, they don't have insurance, and they seriously injure somebody. In that situation, it's unfortunate, obviously, the injury and the reality of no insurance. But what we hope to find is that the injured person is covered with uninsured motorist benefits through their own insurance coverage or coverage that is in their household. And the way that works is that the coverage is supposed to apply to the person who is injured by an uninsured driver, and the insurance company of the injured person steps in and pays the damages as if they were paying the damages on behalf of the at-fault driver. So uninsured motorist coverage is very important coverage for people to have, and there's also underinsured coverage, which applies in the same way, but that's in a situation where the at-fault driver has insurance but not enough insurance to cover your damages, and then you recover the rest of your damages from your own insurance company through your underinsured coverage.
If you're injured in a Michigan car crash, do you have to communicate with your own insurance company?
You do need to communicate with your own insurance company to a certain extent. You have to make them aware of the crash. You have to fill out their forms. You need to provide them information about your injuries. So there are some obligations you have to communicate with them. You should try to answer their questions as best you can. If there are disputes that arise, you need to consider whether you should contact an attorney or some other representative to advise you on those disputes. But hopefully people can communicate with their insurance companies and get their claims paid without needing a lawyer. I do have to say that sometimes it doesn't happen, but we hope that it does for everybody.
So if you've been injured or have had a Michigan auto crash, do you need to hire an attorney right away?
You need to immediately consider whether you should have an attorney. That depends on the facts of your crash, how much is in dispute. I say to all family members and friends, you're probably better off hiring an attorney.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
In the Name of Personal Injury Law is brought to you by the Sinas Law Firm.